Hello, and welcome to Scratch Paper, a writing-related podcast. I'm Alicia de los Reyes, and this is episode 32. In case you don't know me, I'm a writer and a parent of a toddler, and in this podcast, I share updates, writing prompts, questions, and a lesson or a pep talk. And today we're going to talk about 5 steps to start revising. If you're a new listener, welcome. I'm so happy to have you here. If you're a returning listener, thanks so much for coming back. You can find the show notes and sign up for my newsletter at aliciadelosreyes.com/podcast32. It's aliciadelosreyes.com/podcast32. And you'll also now, when you sign up for my newsletter, get a free ebook called Suck It Up and Revise. So I'll talk more about that at the end. But first, I'm going to go ahead and do a writing and reading update. So writing update, I don't have terribly much new to report. My novel manuscript called Wait is on submission, meaning that my agent has sent it out to some publishers and we're waiting to hear back if anybody's interested in buying it. And Wait is my novel about a psychic named Leah who's helping an evangelical family whose foster daughter has stopped talking. And if you've been listening for a while, I've been working on it for like about a year. So it's pretty exciting to have it out on submission. Also a little bit scary, very scary actually. I also wrote something that is a little different from what I usually share on here. It's not fiction. It's a resource, like a table for the Craft Industry Alliance journal. And it was about best tools for selling PDFs online. So the Craft Industry Alliance is like a guild or a trade organization for makers and artists, like people who make stuff and sell it on Etsy, or people who design patterns and maybe sell it on their own site, and makers, designers, artists, and then also people who work with them. So like website designers, graphic designers, and people like me. I'm a copywriter. So I made this table for the journal, which they publish, I think, monthly. And it's got all these different like website plugins and third-party sites and services that you can use to sell PDFs. And actually, thanks to the research I did, I am switching over my way that I sell PDFs. I also sell my ebooks, DIY Writing Retreat, and DIY Chicklet as PDFs on my site. And I'm moving to a platform called Payhip, which is pretty handy, easy to use, thanks to that research I did, because I realized I need to charge VAT, value-added tax, which is this tax that they have in the European Union that they don't have here, and it varies by country, and it's quite complicated to do yourself. So Payhip is going to take care of that for me. So anyway, all that to say, I'm really curious to hear if you guys sell PDFs of your ebooks, fellow indie authors, and I'm interested in talking about it. If you have questions or if you want to sell things, sell PDFs, and you have a question, you can hit me up on Instagram or Twitter at @LikesOatmeal, or you can comment on the show notes here on my website. And I'd also like to hear how you sell PDFs or what platforms you use, because I'm always looking for new ones. So anyway, that's my writing update. Reading, I am reading Miss Kopp's Midnight Confessions, which is the third in the Kopp Sisters series by Amy Stewart. The first one was Girl Waits with Gun, and I really, really loved Girl Waits with Gun. It's an excellent book. It's about a real historical character named Constance Kopp, who was the first female sheriff in Paterson, New Jersey, I think, Paterson. And I also like it because I grew up in New Jersey, and so I learned about all this history too, though I didn't learn about Constance Kopp. But Miss Kopp's Midnight Confessions is pretty depressing at the moment, so I'm not sure I'm going to finish it. It's about quote unquote wayward girls getting arrested and sent to reformatory schools, which are like prisons for girls, and it's very depressing, and it's even more depressing because it's all true. So I'm going to look for a new book. Another great book I read recently, though, was Uprooted by Naomi Novik. And she's a fantasy writer, who I had never heard of before. And she has this whole series about, I guess, the Napoleonic Wars, if there were dragons. which I am planning to check out. But this one is a standalone, Uprooted, and it's about a girl who goes to live with this like local leader called the dragon. Anyway, it's also got a haunted wood in it. It's really, I loved it. It was fantastic. I'm not giving a very good description of it, but it was great. Okay, so that was my writing and reading update. Let's get into the lesson. So 5 steps to start revising. I just want to give a quick background story for this episode, which is where most of these tips came from. So when I was working on my thesis at the University of New Hampshire for my MFA program, my Master of Fine Arts, I was in the creative nonfiction program there. And in my 3rd year, I had to turn in a thesis and defend it. And what always happened to all the like graduating folks in the MFA program was you would have to turn in your thesis, then your advisor would read it and give you notes back. Then you would revise your thesis, and then you would defend it before your advisor and then a few other professors and maybe like an expert if you were writing on some specific like area. So I was in the creative nonfiction program, so my thesis was nonfiction. It was a book-length work of immersion journalism where I spent a year in an evangelical church. To get to the revising part, when I turned in my thesis, what ended up happening was I got back notes from my advisor 2 weeks before my defense was due. And this wasn't my advisor's fault at all. It's the way it works because there's not that many advisors for all of the graduate students. And so pretty much everybody was in the same boat as I was, having like maybe 2 or 3 weeks to revise. So I was absolutely terrified that I wasn't going to be able to revise my thesis well enough. And then I would have to go before a defense, I would have to do my defense, and I wouldn't get my MFA, because this is how you get your MFA. You like defend your thesis and then you're done. If you don't, then you don't graduate. So I had this giant 120 page manuscript, notes from my advisor, and 2 weeks to get it into better shape and something that I would be that I could call finished, basically. And so I was under the gun, and that's where these techniques and tactics that I came up with and that other people shared with me came from this like 2 week writing assignment. So it was really intense, and I was really scared, like I said, but it also forced me to concentrate and focus on just revising. And I'm definitely the type of person who will procrastinate a revision for a really long time, put it off for a really long time, because I just do not like revising. And I think that that's pretty common, that people don't like looking at their own work critically. So, okay. So let me get into the steps that I took to actually revise this thesis, because I defended my thesis, I got my MFA, everybody lived happily ever after. So let me share what I did. And what other people shared with me that I could do. So first step was take a break. So this was kind of built into the whole process of the graduate program, because I had to turn in my rough draft to my advisor, and then she had to read it and give me back comments. So it was built in, and I was forced to take a break because I couldn't do anything until I had the comments from my advisor, because there was no point in revising without my advisor's comments, because my advisor would be the one reading it at the end, for one thing. So I wanted to take her voice, her ideas into account. And the other thing was I just needed a break. I'd been working on this project for a year, excuse me, and writing it every 2 weeks, turning in a new chapter for a workshop, and researching and writing at the same time. So I had been totally immersed in it, which I think often happens when you're writing a draft, whether it's fiction or nonfiction. You just get kind of consumed by it. And then I didn't have the distance from it that I needed to actually start revising. So the first step was definitely take a break. So, you don't need to be in an MFA program or graduate program or have an advisor to take a break. Some things that I've done since then are send my story or essay or book off to somebody who's willing to read it. So sometimes it's a close friend if I am just kind of in the like early stages and I just want positive feedback. I might send it to a good friend who isn't necessarily a writer, just somebody who enjoys reading. And I'll say something like, I just need some encouragement. Can you tell me, like, is this good? Like, do you like anything about this? And like tell them that I'm looking for that kind of like positive feedback. And I might also ask, like, are there any questions that you have? So it can help me figure out what direction to go in. But that's usually, I guess, when I'm partway through a draft. Sometimes you get stuck and it's helpful to send it out to an encouraging friend. But when I'm finished with the draft, I will send it to my writing exchange partner, Larry, and he will give me comments on it, and he'll give me I'll ask for, if I have a specific question, like I can't get the ending to work, I feel like something's missing, or I'm not sure if it's clear, like my intent is clear here. I might ask a question like that, but I also might just say like, here you go, what do you think? And Larry will give me both like big picture comments and small, like, this is the wrong there comments. So that's having a writing friend is really helpful. And I've talked about that in another episode called how to have an email writing exchange or how to have a writing group. I'll link to it in the show notes. But if you don't have a writing friend, you can still take a break from your work and share it with other people. You can try going to writing meetups. When I first moved out here to Seattle, I did that. And those meet at all different times of the day. And a lot of times they'll have like time to write and then time to share your work. And that's how I found kind of hanging around afterwards and catching up and meeting other people is how I found people who would be interested in doing a writing exchange like Larry and I do, where we would trade work and comment on each other's work or getting together and writing. And both of those are really valuable. So if you don't want to send out your work to somebody, if it's still, you feel like you want to work on it some more before somebody else actually reads it, I would say hide your work. So if you print it out or if you write it longhand, put it away somewhere. If you write on the computer, like I think most of us do, then just close it. Don't leave that window open. Even though you're still working on this, you'll get back to it later, you're going to revise, but you're taking a break. So close it. And then do something else. So this can be hard if you are used to filling your free time with writing. You can try doing a new project, like a new writing project. You can try writing in a totally different genre or about something totally new. I usually have like a fun project that I've been waiting to do while I finish my last project. But sometimes I'll do something like, I don't know, some other writing goal that I have, like working on this podcast or updating my ebooks or making a website or fixing up my website or trying a new platform. Like I remember once my new project when I was done with a rough draft was to get on Instagram. And or you can also try something like totally new, like paint, take up jogging, like go for a nature walk, just like give yourself time and space. And I would say at least for 2 weeks, like at a minimum. I usually take longer, like 6 weeks, because I really want to get that distance from like being obsessed and immersed in my work and really like loving it and feeling attached to the characters and attached to what's happening, whether they're real or imaginary. And you want to be able to look at your work with more critical eyes. So taking a break is crucial. Okay. The second step that I took when I had my 2-week thesis project to revise was set a deadline and make a planned schedule. So I didn't actually set the deadline. The deadline was built into my program, but you can set a deadline. You can say, I'm going to take a month to revise this, or I'm going to take 6 months to revise this. And at the end of that, I'm going to call it done. And if you are like me and it helps you to have external like expectation, you can tell your writing friend, hey, I'm going to send you this revision in 6 months. Sometimes I'll tell my agent, like, I'm going to send you my new draft in the fall, whatever. And just having it out there, even though it's not like nobody's going to come after me if I don't finish it on time, just knowing that somebody else is expecting it, waiting for it, is really helpful and forces me to actually work on it. And then part 2 of this step 2 is to make a plan or a schedule and follow it. So when I had 2 weeks to revise my thesis, I was like, oh my God, how am I going to start this? Like, where am I going to begin? It's 120 pages long. I have tons of comments, or, like a few pages of comments from my advisor and all these problems I know I need to fix. Like, how am I going to begin? And so what I did was I sat down and I read through the comments, and then I made a schedule for the next 2 weeks. And I remember I wrote it out on like a piece of plain white paper. And I decided I was going to revise 2 chapters a day. And then so I had maybe like 20 chapters, I want to say. So let's say it took 10 days to do that. And then the extra days, which were only like 3 or 4 extra days, were going to be for proofreading, any like big picture tweaks, and like making sure, like doing one last read through. So like if say I decided one day when I was revising a chapter, like, oh, this chapter really belongs somewhere else, I would move it, but I wouldn't go change everything else in the other chapters. I would wait until the end to do that. And so breaking down the work like that into manageable steps and giving a task for each day that was really clear that I could cross off. Like, oh, I did chapter 5 today. Now I'm going to do chapter 6. Okay. That was so helpful, both in like calming me down and in making me realize that it was possible. Like at the end of 2 weeks, if I stuck to the schedule, I would have revised my entire thesis. And so making a plan will, like, I believe, help make you able to do a revision, even if it's a really gigantic task, even if you're not sure where to begin, because this plan will give you a place to begin. And then stick to it. So I put that calendar by my desk, and it was what I saw every morning when I sat down to do work. You could put it on your fridge. You could tell somebody in your family or like a roommate about it. You could tell a writing friend about it and ask them to check in with you to see if you're keeping up to it. And then also you'll have the deadline, if you set a deadline, that you're working towards. And so you can see your progress. And I think even just like crossing off tasks is really encouraging. So the more you stick to it, the more you will stick to it, I believe. All right, so those are the first 2 steps. Take a break, set a deadline, and make a plan. And then the third step is more writing related. So I decided to concentrate on one thing at a time. So not only once I knew my task for the day, let's say I was going to revise chapters 5 and 6, I would then go through and look at 3 different things. So these are the 3 things that I recommend you concentrate on, one at a time. Detail, voice, and clarity. So this is true. These 3 things are important to all types of writing. So whether you're writing fiction, nonfiction, an essay, a book, a short story, the only thing maybe they don't apply to is like lyric or experimental work or poetry. I don't know much about poetry. But detail, voice, and clarity, I've talked about these in another episode, I think called like the secret rules of writing. I think it's about clarity and details there. Definitely includes clarity. Now I can't remember the other secret rule of writing, but I will link to it in the show notes. Because when you have these 3 things to look for, together they kind of make like all good writing. So I believe that. You might think there are other things that go to it. That's totally cool. I would love to hear what you think. But so a lot of times when I see people talking about their revising online, like on Instagram where somebody will share what they're doing to work on their revision, I see like questions or thoughts about something that I would label more as like plot or believability. Like, oops, I found a giant plot hole here. Like there's no way this will happen. Or I'm reading through this and it just doesn't, like, I don't know if it's really possible. It doesn't make any sense. So that to me is very like nebulous and hard to fix. Like, I'm not sure how to fix the problem of like, this plot doesn't seem like it will happen, because I think like pretty much any plot can happen. I mean, when you think about the variety of stories that we read, of crazy things that happen in books, you can make anything happen. Anything can be a plot. So, but if you drill it down to these three things, detail, voice, and clarity, then the kind of bigger problems of the manuscript will, or the short story or essay, will solve themselves, I believe. So let me talk a little bit about what I mean by these three things. So detail is what I always struggle with, so that's why I put it first. This might not be your problem. This is definitely idiosyncratic to me, but detail, like when I write a rough draft, whether it's an essay or a short story or any kind of rough draft, I pretty much always just think I'm like boring the reader. I don't know why I think this, but I do. And I will just write down kind of like almost an outline, but it's just in sentences. Like this happened, and then that happened, and then this happened. And like, no matter what, whenever I get comments back, it's almost always like, can you expand this? Can you explain what you mean? Can you flesh out this scene? Can you let the reader see what's happening? And then I will go back and say like, oh, the reader won't mind if I like show a character and tell what she looks like while I'm explaining what she does or something like that. So I always need to put in more detail. And the way that I try and do this, especially when I'm writing fiction, is to imagine the scene as it's happening, kind of like it's a movie. And the things that I notice, I just put those in the description of my story. So because I believe that like whatever you see in your mind's eye are the important parts. So whether you notice like the wallpaper in a room, or the sound of somebody's voice, or the weather outside, but those things might seem kind of random, but when you put them together, I think they will be more coherent and cohesive than you realize. So detail is the first thing that I always work on. The next thing is voice. And this is also something I've had trouble with. If you've been listening for a long time, you might remember that when I wrote a novel called Finding Lucy, which is currently shelved, I had to do a major revision that took about a year, and it was all about changing the voice of the narrator. So the novel was told from three perspectives, a mother and two daughters. And the feedback I got from many, many editors was all the voices all sound the same. And I realized that they were right, because they were all my voice. So I had to change what I ended up doing was leaving the mother's voice, because I decided I wanted to leave the mother most as me. And then the two daughters I made different. So one of the daughters is like adventurous and spunky, and also really, really mad and bitter about the way that her life has gone, because her other sister has disappeared, or her sister has disappeared. And so I changed her voice to be more bitter and antagonistic and just like vibrant and lively, shorter sentences, like fewer adjectives, things like that. And then the other sister, who is troubled and who's missing, you don't really know where she is for most of the book, I made her voice much more confused and opaque, and more difficult to follow, as opposed to like, really clear, bright reflections like her other sister was having. So voice has to do with perspective and narrator. If you're writing from first person, which I was in this novel, I think it's trickier, because you have to be in the voice of whoever's speaking at the time, which is probably just one character. Most books are told from just one character's perspective. But it's also, I think, hard if you're doing third person, especially if you do third person close. Like Harry Potter is always the example that comes to mind, because Harry Potter is like, it's a third person narrative, but you really get to see inside Harry's brain, and Harry's like an 11-year-old boy. So it's this kind of tricky balance between words that the narrator would use and thoughts or main character would use, and like giving enough background and background and details, I guess, that so that you can follow the story. So this is a very roundabout way of talking about voice, but I think voice is actually a really tricky and hard thing to nail down. And the best advice I ever had for working on voice was from, I think it was from my teaching assistant advisor. So when I was a TA, we each had an advisor just for that, which was really nice. Leah Williams, who said to write every day, like make your students write a paragraph as soon as they get in. And it can be a response to a prompt or it can be free writing, but that's really how you develop your voice, by writing and just seeing what happens. And so I found this to be true when I was revising Finding Lucy, actually, because once I would get into the mode of one character's voice and I would stick with that one character for a really long time, and then I would change and go to another character. So I think getting in the habit and focusing on one piece at a time was really helpful. But if you're writing something that's like an essay or third person, you can also, this is a great place to rely on feedback, because it will jump out when something sounds wrong. Like if you have been writing really kind of like classily and fancy words the whole time, and then you'll all of a sudden use a curse word, that will jump out to somebody else in a way that it might not to you, because maybe in your head it all flows together. Or if you've been using kind of like long sentences, or maybe a variety of long and short sentences, and then you get to a part where it's just like all short sentences or all long sentences, that will jump out to somebody because it'll be harder to read. It won't flow as well. So this is another spot where it's really important to, I think, get feedback from somebody. And it doesn't have to be a writer person. It can be a reader person, so somebody who likes to read. And just ask them to look for like places that sound wrong or that are jarring. Okay, so then the last part of things to concentrate on is clarity. And like I said, I talked about this before in another episode, but clarity, you want clarity no matter what kind of thing you're writing. So I don't mean that you need to like share everything up front. I just mean that when things happen, it's clear to your reader that something has happened. So at the crucial moment, you don't want your reader to say, huh, like what just happened? You want them to be totally on board. And if they are surprised, if it's something surprising, you want them to be surprised. If it's a twist ending, you want them to know it's a twist ending. If you're leaving something out, you want them to know you're leaving something out. You don't want them to wonder like, oh, are they leaving something out on purpose? Or am I going to find that out later? Did I already find that out and have to flip back? So clarity is important for everything. And I think this is another place where having an outside reader is helpful, and it might even be more helpful if they're just kind of a random reader and not necessarily like somebody who's read your writing a lot, because they'll be able to put like question marks and say, huh, and ask you what's going on. Excuse me. So, all right, so those are the first, we're up to Step 4. So the first 3 were take a break, set a deadline and make a plan, and then concentrate on these 3 things one at a time: detail, voice, and clarity. And now we're up to 4th step, which is my favorite one, which one of my professors, Meredith Hall, shared with me. So when I was writing, so this goes back to the thesis, the original story that I was talking about, the original manuscript, that I was talking about, which was about my year in an evangelical church. So when I was writing this book, like I said, I wrote it basically over the course of a year in a workshop. And maybe it was just a semester maybe I did it over 2 different classes. Anyway, what I did was I wrote it as I was going through it. So, I spent time doing all different things, participating in this church, and just kind of like taking notes on what happened. And then when I wanted to write something, I would pick one of the like momentous things that had happened to me. Like one time I went to a youth group meeting, and people spoke in tongues there. And I had never seen that before, and it totally blew my mind. So I decided to write about that for one of my essays. And then, another time I went to a service, and I wrote about, and I saw somebody I thought maybe get saved. So I'd never seen that before. So I wrote about that for another essay. Excuse me. But This kind of like piecemeal way of writing did not make for a coherent book. And that's really what I needed at the end for my thesis. So, what my professor, Meredith Hall, suggested I do was go through and look for themes. And you can do this in any, like if it's an essay, you can go through and look for themes in your essay. If it's a short story, you can go through and look for themes in that. So I just kind of read through my manuscript quickly looking for themes, and I made a whole list of them. And I think I had like maybe 5 or 6. So when I say themes, I don't only mean like the things you looked for in English class, like the hero's journey or love or what it means to be a good person. But, you know, put those down if they come up in your book too. But also like kind of smaller things that just come up a lot. So for example, my thesis, one thing that came up a lot was this ongoing friendship I had with one of the women in the church who was kind of similar to me, like outside of the church, like just in little ways. Like we were both married, or I was not married, but I was living with my boyfriend and she was married. And so we both had like a significant other. I remember one time we both painted our nails the same color. Like we both like to paint our nails. We were not ready to have kids. I remember us bonding over that. And she was just very like down to earth, which I think I'm a down to earth person too. And so we got along really well. And so I noticed when I was reading through my book, like, oh, this friendship comes up in this chapter and in this chapter and in this chapter. So I wrote it down. It could be other things too, like something else that came up was my relationship with my boyfriend, because over the course of the year that I was in, like spending time in the church, I also got engaged and got married. And so that was an important theme, like kind of my own life parallel to this church, the people who I was getting to know in this church, and how different our choices and decisions were, like the different things that we thought about. And then also some of the similar things that we thought about, you know, like love and commitment, things like that. So those two characters, my boyfriend and my friend at the church, were both kind of themes. They just came up over and over again. And so, but other themes might be something like, I was thinking about this book, Uprooted, and the one that I mentioned in the beginning, it's a fantasy novel, and there's this like haunted, maybe like alive forest that will like attack places. And so trees are like a big theme, like how trees look, whether they're menacing or whether they're pretty, what their leaves look like, whether they're alive or dead. And the trees are like a recurring theme. You just like almost every chapter, there's something about a tree in it somewhere, even if it's just a quick sentence. So that kind of helps to tie the whole book together and keep you focused on the really important parts of the book. So the same is true for themes in your story or essay or in your novel or your book-length work of nonfiction. They need a shorter name for that. But like these recurring moments will tie everything together and make your book seem less like, you know, a choppy collection of chapters, or if it's a shorter work, a choppy collection of paragraphs, and more like a coherent, cohesive unit. So what I did after I made my list of themes is I went back and looked at each of the chapters and I highlighted with a different color for each theme where everything came up. So like, let's say I did like pink for my friendship with the woman in the church. And then I could literally see when I laid out my manuscript on the floor, which I did, like, oh, the friend shows up in this first chapter and then she doesn't show up again for like 4 chapters. Let's see if I can go back and put in just like a moment with her in the other chapters in between, or in at least, you know, 1 or 2 of them. And that moment might have been something like, I saw her at church and we waved hi, or like, I remember once I saw something happen, like when I saw the woman get saved, I called up this friend and said, like, you know, kind of bounced off my reactions off of her. And so those like conversations and just little moments, glimpses, helped tie the book together so that throughout the book, the reader's kind of reading what's happening to me and they're getting more familiar with the characters who are really important to the story. So this seems like I just love this idea because it's such a practical way to like capture themes. Like themes are this like magical thing you learn about in, say, like ninth grade. And it's like before, for me, it was like before there had been no themes. I was never conscious of them. And afterwards, it's like the only thing you look for and write about, like all the way through college. And it's like, it seems like magic, I think, sometimes. Like, how do the writers sneak in these ideas? This is how. They make a list of them and then put them in everywhere they're not. I mean, they probably don't do that literally, but I think that you can do it. You can do it that way. And it worked for me. It made my book like much more tied together. And so this was one of the things I did on like the spillover days, the extra days that I have. It put my thesis, like it made the pieces a puzzle that fit into each other as opposed to just like disparate experiences. Okay, that's enough for step 4. All right, the last step, number 5, is kind of a meta step, and it goes back, it touches on almost all of these things, and it's work with other people. So I think this is the most important step, because when you're talking about revising, what you're really talking about is making your work appealing and readable and enjoyable for other readers. So, I mean, I don't mean enjoyable like they have to love every single thing that happens. I mean, like they can't stop reading it, like they want to read it. And it's really hard to get that perspective all by yourself. And I think it's not a good idea to try and do it, because you become very attached to your own work. I know I always am. Like every single time I get comments back, even from my great friend Larry, I'm always like, oh, they just don't get me. Like they don't understand what I was trying to do. But they didn't get it, right? So I am responsible for changing that. So work with other people. So I had my advisor. But you don't need an advisor to work with other people. You can find a friend. You can find a writing friend. I also, this year for my last novel, Wait, found 2 beta readers, I would call them, through Instagram. And those were just people who I met totally randomly, who I knew were interested in the same kind of things I was, because we'd gotten to know each other through like commenting and talking to each other. So online, there's lots of places to find other people. You can join a writing group, go to meetups. You can also go to like open mic nights. So a local indie publishing company, which I don't think is actually around anymore, actually hosted a couple of open mics in different neighborhoods in Seattle when I first moved here, and I went there and read my work and heard other people's work. And even just doing that will help see if you're getting the kind of reaction that you're looking for, like if people are laughing in the right places, or if they're surprised, or whatever you want them to be. So work with other people. Another person who I know I've mentioned before who I work with is my agent, and she is incredibly helpful. But you don't need an agent to find another person. You can find fellow writers. You can reach out to like family members. I've asked all kinds of different people to read my work, and I always appreciate the feedback they offer. So, okay. So those are the 5 steps that I took when I was revising my thesis in 2 weeks, and I did it. Like I said, it worked. I passed. I got my Master of Fine Arts. I wouldn't say that my manuscript was perfect. It was not, and I knew that even when I turned it in. But it was good enough for me to feel confident to query it. So I think that's an important next step. So you don't have to feel like your manuscript is totally perfect to send it out. And I think that if you wait until it's perfect, you will never send it out. So the next step for me was definitely to query it. And eventually I found my agent and we revised it together. So that's another thing to keep in mind, that even though like the working with other people, it never ends. So I would love to hear how you start revising. You can comment on the show notes, which are at aliciadelosreyes.com/podcast32. You can also find me on Instagram and Twitter. I'm at Lakes Oatmeal. And if you enjoyed listening to these 5 first steps, they are all in my new ebook, which is called Suck It Up and Revise, which pretty much sums up my attitude towards revision. You can find that again at aliciadelosreyes.com/podcast32. I'm going to put a box there for you to sign up, or a link to sign up and get it emailed to you. It's totally free. You just have to put in your email. And it is 14 chapters with, I think 14 exercises that are just like this one, like concrete, just like all these ones that I've shared. I mean, concrete first steps, things to do. And I think it's a lot like my other ebooks. If you've read either of those, DIY Writing Retreat or DIY Chicklet, practical, down to earth, exercises that you can like take steps to do. You can see exactly how to do them. And my goal is always with these ebooks to help demystify an opaque process. So like make it clear, make it concrete, because it drives me nuts when I can't get a handle on something. And if you've read Suck It Up and Revise, I would love to hear what you think of it. You can tag me on Instagram, and you can also use the hashtag Suck It Up and Revise, or comment on anything related to this podcast using the hashtag Scratch Paper Podcast. So thank you so much for listening, and happy writing.